The city had seen better days. Once vibrant, it now stood in tatters, its streets lined with cracked sidewalks and broken streetlights that flickered like dying stars. Marcus Johnson had lived here all his life, a product of a city that had forgotten the value of kindness. As a black man working as a waiter in a small, dimly lit diner, Marcus had long ago learned to navigate a world that often passed him by without a second glance. He wasn't a man of many words, nor of grand ambitions, just a man who worked hard, kept his head down, and tried to survive. His diner was tucked away on a forgotten street, the neon sign buzzing faintly above the door. Inside, the scent of fried food mixed with the musky smell of old leather booths and lingering coffee. It was the kind of place where the customers came and went without much thought. They were the tired ones, the ones who had seen too much of the world's indifference. One cold evening, as Marcus was closing up for the night, a low, distant sound reached his ears. It was the thud of something heavy hitting the ground, followed by muffled voices and angry shouts. It was a familiar kind of noise, the kind that meant trouble. But Marcus had learned long ago to keep walking and mind his business. Yet tonight, something tugged at him. A quiet voice, a pull deeper than just the instinct to avoid conflict. He turned down the alley next to the diner, his breath a pale cloud in the chilly night air. There, lying near the sidewalk's edge, was an older man, slumped and bleeding, his clothes torn, face bruised. He looked like he had been caught in the teeth of the city, chewed up, and left to die. For a moment, Marcus hesitated. This part of town was dangerous, and getting involved could lead to more trouble than he was willing to deal with. He had seen enough of the city's darker side to know that sometimes it was better to look the other way. But then, he remembered something his mother had always told him. "We don't walk past hurt if we can help it, baby." Taking a deep breath, Marcus approached the man. The stranger's hands shook as he tried to push himself up but failed. The man's eyes were glassy, lost somewhere between pain and confusion. His wallet, now empty, lay discarded a few feet away. The streets were deserted, no one else in sight to offer help. Marcus crouched down beside him. "Hey, you all right?" he asked, his voice gentle but firm. He could already tell the answer, but he asked anyway. The man's eyes flickered with recognition, though it was clear he could barely focus. "There's no one else out here. No one who'll help you but me," Marcus murmured. The man gave a slight shake of his head, as if his pride was still warring with the pain in his body. Without a word, Marcus offered his hand. The stranger hesitated for a moment, but then took it, his cold fingers gripping Marcus's hand with a quiet desperation. Marcus helped him up carefully, steadying his weight as he guided the older man towards the diner. The dim light of the neon sign above cast a sickly glow over the scene, but Marcus didn't care. He wasn't about to leave this man out here alone in the cold. "Come on, you're not staying out here tonight," he said, his voice calm but resolute. As they walked into the diner, the warmth hit them immediately. The faint scent of burnt coffee and frying oil hung in the air, familiar and comforting. It wasn't much, just a small diner with worn leather booths and a few scattered patrons. But it was home for Marcus. He led the stranger to a booth in the back, where he always kept an extra blanket tucked under the seat for nights just like this. Marcus returned to the counter, his hands moving automatically as he pulled out leftover stew from the fridge, a slice of bread, and a small piece of pie that he had been saving for himself, but now set aside without a second thought. He glanced back at the man, who had settled into the booth but sat stiffly, his eyes downcast. For a moment, Marcus thought about saying something, some kind of words to fill the silence, but he didn't. He simply set the food down in front of the man, who stared at it for a long moment before finally reaching for the spoon. The man's movements were slow, deliberate, almost as if he was afraid that one wrong motion might shatter him entirely. Marcus watched him quietly, recognizing the weight of shame and exhaustion that hung around the older man like an invisible cloak. "You're not the only one who's had a rough night," Marcus finally said, breaking the silence. His voice was calm, almost soothing. "Last week, a kid about 16 came in, soaked through, hungry, hadn't eaten in 2 days. Gave him some stew, dried his clothes by the stove." He leaned on the counter casually, watching as the man hesitated, his fingers still hovering over the bowl. "Then there's Mrs. Hicks," Marcus continued, shifting the conversation to someone else. "She lost her husband last year. Comes in every Tuesday. I slip her a little care package when I can, and she always talks about her grandkids. Doesn't ask for much." He paused, looking back at the man. "And Mr. Morales, down the street, he trades me Spanish lessons for a slice of pie. Says my accent's terrible, but I think he just likes the company." The older man's lips twitched, just slightly, as though he were on the verge of a smile. It was faint, fragile, but it was there. Marcus caught it, and in that moment, he realized that the small kindnesses he offered were like bridges, small and fragile, but strong enough to reach across the chasm of loneliness and despair that so often defined their world. "You're not broken," Marcus added quietly. "You're just human. And right now, you're not alone." The days following their encounter felt like an extension of Marcus's usual routine. Long hours, a quiet diner, and a constant hum of unnoticed effort. He didn't expect to hear from William Hartman again. After all, the man had seemed like just another fleeting stranger, someone whose face would be lost to the city's indifference, just like so many others. But on a crisp morning a few days later, the door to the diner opened with a soft jingle, and Marcus looked up, expecting the usual crowd of regulars, tired, familiar faces. Instead, he froze when he saw William standing there, his sharp-tailored coat and neatly combed hair a stark contrast to the battered figure Marcus had helped just days ago. The transformation was jarring. Where the man had once been broken, now he stood poised, almost regal, a stranger entirely from the one Marcus had lifted from the streets. "Good morning, Marcus," William greeted, his voice smooth and commanding. "I hope I'm not interrupting." Marcus blinked, still processing the shift. No, not at all. What can I get you?" he asked, trying to mask his surprise with his usual polite professionalism. "I was hoping we could talk," William said, his tone friendly but serious. "I owe you an explanation." Marcus's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" William slid into a booth, his gaze unwavering as he continued. "That night when you found me, I wasn't being entirely honest with you. I'm William Hartman, the newly elected councilman for this district." Marcus stared at him, unsure if he was hearing things correctly. William Hartman, the man who had been beaten and left on the street, was a city councilman? It felt impossible. "I know I must look very different now," William continued with a slight chuckle. "But the truth is, I wasn't just some guy off the street. I was trying to clear my head, to escape everything that was weighing on me." Marcus stood behind the counter, speechless. He had no idea how to react. How could someone like this, a politician, end up in such a situation? How had he been so vulnerable? "I'm sure you're wondering how it happened," William said, as if reading Marcus's mind. "The pressure of my role, the constant demands from the city. I made some poor decisions, and that night was the result. I was too proud to admit that I needed help." Marcus's mind raced. He had only helped because it was the right thing to do. He never expected it to be anything more than that. William leaned forward, his eyes sincere. "But you didn't just walk away, Marcus. You helped me. Most people wouldn't have done that. They would have seen a man down on his luck and turned the other way. But you didn't." Marcus didn't know what to say. He had never thought much of himself, never imagined his actions would matter to someone like William Hartman. "You don't need to apologize for helping," Marcus said quietly, not quite meeting William's eyes. "I just did what I could." William smiled warmly. "That's the thing, Marcus. Most people do only what they can. You did what you chose to do. That's why I'm here. I want you to know that I appreciate it. I see something in you, and I think you could be a part of something that's bigger than both of us." Marcus felt a strange knot in his stomach. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice uncertain. "I'm working on a citywide initiative to help the homeless," William explained. "We're starting a new program that will provide more resources to those who need it most. And I want you to be part of it, Marcus." Marcus blinked, feeling overwhelmed. He was just a waiter, a man doing his best to get by. What could he possibly contribute to something like that? "I know it seems like a lot," William said, sensing Marcus's hesitation. "But you have the heart for it. You didn't just help me because it was convenient. You helped because it was the right thing to do. And I think that's what this city needs more than anything else." Marcus's hands gripped the counter, his mind still swirling with disbelief. "I don't know anything about running programs or managing anything like that," he muttered. "You don't need to," William reassured him. "What you have is something far more valuable. Real, raw empathy. That's the kind of leadership this city needs." Marcus looked at the thick envelope William had slid across the table. "I can't promise anything," he said quietly, his heart racing. "But I'll think about it." William nodded, standing up. "That's all I ask. Just come to the community event tomorrow. See what we're working on." Marcus watched him leave, the weight of the envelope still heavy in his hands. His life had always been about surviving, just getting through another day. But now, there was a chance to be part of something that could change everything. And for the first time in a long while, Marcus felt a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, he was capable of more. The next day, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that his life had shifted in a way he hadn't expected. The diner, the steady rhythm of his work, had felt like his world for so long. Predictable, simple. But now, with the envelope William had given him lying on the counter, unopened, Marcus couldn't focus on anything else. The weight of the offer hung over him, tugging at his mind like a constant pull. It wasn't that Marcus didn't want to help. He'd always believed in doing the right thing, in looking out for others. But this was different. This was a chance to step outside the small, familiar world he knew and into something larger, something that required more than just a kind gesture or a hot meal. This required commitment, responsibility, a leadership he didn't think he was ready for. His mind wandered back to the evening William had shown up at the diner. Marcus had seen something in him, something vulnerable, something that made him real. He had helped a man who was out of his depth, just as he had helped countless others before. But this? A city initiative? A chance to make a real difference in the lives of those who had nothing? It felt like too much. "Hey, Marcus," a voice interrupted his thoughts. It was Shane, one of the regulars, a weathered man with a thick beard and a permanent limp. "You all right, man? You've been staring at that envelope for an hour?" Marcus blinked, then looked up. "Yeah, just thinking." Shane gave him a knowing look. "You still thinking about that guy? The councilman?" Marcus nodded, turning the envelope over in his hands. "Yeah, I don't know. He wants me to help with a homeless initiative, but I'm not sure I'm the right person for that. I don't have the background, the experience. I'm just a waiter." Shane leaned in closer, his voice low but firm. "Marcus, you've always had a heart for people. You've helped me more times than I can count. You don't need a title to make a difference. All you need is to care." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't used to people telling him that. He wasn't used to hearing that he could do something more, that he was capable of change. But Shane's words echoed in his mind long after the conversation ended. The rest of the day passed in a blur of orders and refills. Each time the bell above the diner door rang, Marcus's heart would race a little, wondering if today would be the day he made his decision. His shift dragged on as he worked, barely noticing the time slipping away. He kept glancing at the envelope on the counter, as though the answer would reveal itself if he stared at it long enough. But nothing happened. By the time his shift was over, the diner had emptied out. The last customers had left, and the street outside was quiet. Marcus stood behind the counter, the envelope still sitting there, unopened. His fingers hovered over it for a long moment, uncertainty and doubt twisting in his chest. Could he really do this? Was he ready for a responsibility that big? The sound of footsteps in the parking lot outside broke his train of thought. He looked up, startled to see William Hartman walking through the door. No entourage, just him. He hadn't expected to see him again. Not like this. "Thought you might want some company," William said with a slight smile. "I figured you'd be here." Marcus looked at him, his heart racing. I wasn't sure if I'd come." William stepped closer, his presence calm but commanding. "I understand. This is a big decision. You don't need to rush into anything." For a moment, they both stood in silence, the only sound the hum of the refrigerator and the distant traffic outside. William glanced at the envelope and then back at Marcus. "Look, I know this isn't easy," William said softly. "I know you're used to staying in your lane, doing what you know. But Marcus, this city needs people like you. Not just to serve food or clean tables, but to show people that kindness is real. To show that there's still something worth fighting for." Marcus shifted, feeling the weight of William's words sink in. He didn't feel like a hero. He didn't feel like he had any power to change anything. But there was a quiet part of him that knew, deep down, that maybe this was his chance. "I'm not sure I can make a difference," Marcus admitted, his voice low. "You already have," William replied gently. "The question isn't whether you can make a difference. It's whether you're willing to try." Marcus looked down at the envelope again. He could feel the tension in his chest, the pull between the familiar comfort of his life and the unknown challenge ahead. Was he really ready to leave the safety of the diner for something more? Was he ready to make a lasting impact on his community? With a deep breath, Marcus made his decision. Slowly, he stood up and walked over to the envelope. He didn't open it right away. Instead, he held it in his hands, feeling the weight of his choice. He turned back to William, who was watching him intently, his eyes filled with quiet hope. "I'll do it," Marcus said finally, his voice steady. "I'll come to the event. I'll be part of this." William smiled, the kind of smile that made Marcus feel like maybe, just maybe, he was capable of more than he ever realized. "Good," William said, his tone proud. "I knew you'd come through." As William left the diner that night, Marcus stood alone in the quiet, still holding the envelope in his hands. It was the beginning of something new, something bigger. And for the first time in a long time, Marcus felt like he was finally ready to take that first step. The day of the event arrived, and Marcus could feel the weight of it pressing on him more with every passing minute. He hadn't had a chance to fully prepare for what lay ahead. As he stood in front of the mirror in his small apartment, adjusting the collar of his shirt, he felt out of place. The navy blue button-up was a step up from his usual diner attire, but it still felt foreign to him. Nothing he owned seemed to fit the occasion. No sharp suits, no polished shoes. Just a regular man, standing in front of a crowd that he could barely imagine. Marcus took a deep breath and gave himself one last look in the mirror. He wasn't a leader. He wasn't a politician. He was just a man who worked in a diner, who had learned to survive by serving food to people who didn't know his name. But today, he would be asked to speak. Today, he would stand in front of strangers and try to make a difference. When he arrived at the community center, Marcus felt even more out of place. The building was large and imposing, gleaming under the afternoon sun. Inside, people in neatly pressed suits and dresses mingled, their laughter and conversations echoing off the high ceilings. The polished floors seemed to mock the worn sneakers on his feet, and the fancy name tags on their chests made him feel small. He stood at the entrance, unsure whether to walk in or turn back. His hands felt clammy, his heart pounding in his chest. For a moment, he considered leaving. This wasn't his world. He didn't belong here. He was just a man who had helped a stranger on a cold night. What did he know about public outreach or policy? But before he could make up his mind, he heard a familiar voice. "Marcus, you made it." He turned to see William Hartman walking toward him, his warm smile instantly putting Marcus at ease. Despite the formal setting, William's presence was still the same. The man who had offered him a chance to make a difference, who had believed in him when he hadn't believed in himself. "You look good," William said, giving him an approving nod. "Glad you decided to come." "I almost didn't," Marcus admitted, a nervous chuckle escaping him. "This place, it's not exactly where I'm used to being." William clapped him on the shoulder. "That's all right. You're here now, and that's all that matters." As they made their way through the crowd, Marcus couldn't help but feel like an outsider. The conversations around him were filled with jargon and phrases he didn't understand. Politicians and business people spoke in tones that made him feel smaller with each word. He felt invisible, a part of something much bigger than himself, but not yet sure how he fit into it. Then, the moment arrived. William stepped up to the podium, his voice booming through the microphone as he welcomed everyone to the event. "Thank you for being here," he said, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. "Today is about change, about coming together as a community and showing that we're not just here to fix problems, we're here to offer hope, to lift up those who need it most. And I want to introduce someone who embodies that spirit of change, someone who has shown me that real leadership starts with simple acts of kindness." The room fell silent, and all eyes turned to William as he motioned to Marcus. "Marcus Johnson," William said with a proud smile. "Marcus, if you would please join me." Marcus's stomach twisted. His legs felt heavy as he slowly made his way to the front. The crowd's eyes were all on him now. He stood at the edge of the stage, looking out at the sea of unfamiliar faces. William stepped aside, giving Marcus a gentle nudge forward. The microphone was cold in his hand as Marcus adjusted it to his height, his fingers shaking. He didn't know what to say. His mind raced with doubt, and for a moment, he considered stepping away, telling them all that he wasn't qualified for this. But the words from the other night came back to him. William's belief in him, the people who had helped him make it through the day, the quiet reminders that sometimes change came from just showing up. "I'm not a leader," Marcus began, his voice steady but quiet. I'm just a guy who works in a diner. I serve coffee, wipe down tables, and listen to people when they need to talk." He paused for a moment, the weight of his words sinking in. "I've always believed that doing the right thing doesn't require a title. It just requires being there when people need you, helping when you can, seeing people, really seeing them, and offering whatever you've got. And that's all I've ever done." The silence in the room felt heavy, but Marcus didn't back down. He continued, his words growing more confident with each passing sentence. "I'm just like everyone else in this room. I've struggled. I've had to fight to get by. But I believe in the good in people. I believe that if we all give a little, we can make a lot of change." He looked out at the crowd, seeing their faces softening, some of them nodding in agreement. For the first time, Marcus felt like he wasn't just invisible. He was being heard. "I didn't do anything special," Marcus finished, his voice stronger now. "I just did what my mama taught me, to help when you can. And I think that's something we all can do. It doesn't matter who you are or what you've got. It's about doing what's right." The room erupted into applause, slow at first, but growing louder with each second. Marcus stood there, feeling a sense of warmth spread through him. For the first time in his life, he realized that even the smallest acts could create ripples of change. As he stepped back from the podium, William was there to greet him with a proud smile. "You did it, Marcus," he said, clapping him on the back. "You've got something special." Marcus couldn't help but smile back. He wasn't sure where this journey would take him, but for the first time, he was no longer afraid to take that first step. The evening after the event, Marcus found himself standing alone in the back of the community center, sipping on a lukewarm cup of coffee. The applause still echoed in his mind, a soft hum that refused to fade away. He could hardly believe what had just happened. For years, he had moved through life with his head down, staying out of the spotlight, keeping to the small, quiet world he knew. Now, somehow, he had stood before a crowd and shared a piece of himself with them. And for the first time, he felt like he wasn't just surviving, he was truly living. The crowd had slowly thinned as the event came to a close, the conversations tapering off into quiet farewells. Marcus felt a shift inside himself, a quiet sense of pride that had been missing for so long. He wasn't sure if he was ready for the responsibility that William had asked him to take on, but something told him that this was only the beginning. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, he was willing to walk it. As he stood there, lost in thought, William approached him again, a warm smile on his face. "You did great, Marcus," he said. "You were the heart of today. The people needed to hear your voice." Marcus shook his head, still processing everything. "I didn't expect it to go like that. I'm not used to being in front of a crowd." "None of us are," William replied with a chuckle. "But that's the point. Leadership doesn't come from titles. It comes from the courage to step forward, even when you don't feel ready." Marcus paused, considering his words. "I don't know if I'm ready for all of this," he admitted. "Helping at the diner is one thing, but this is different." William's expression softened. "I understand. But you've already done the hardest part. You've taken the first step. And that's more than most people ever do. You don't need to have it all figured out right now. We'll figure it out together." Marcus took a deep breath, looking around at the empty room. The tables were being cleared, the lights dimmed. It felt strange, like the event had already become a part of the past. But for Marcus, it was only the beginning. Later that evening, as he walked back to his small apartment, Marcus couldn't help but reflect on everything that had brought him here. He thought about the countless people he had helped in small ways over the years, how each interaction, each simple act of kindness, had added up to something much larger than he had ever imagined. He had always felt like he was just one person, unable to make a difference, but now he realized that was never true. Every small act, every moment of care had mattered. His phone buzzed in his pocket, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a message from William. "Tomorrow, we meet with the team to start planning. I'll need you there. I know it's a lot, but I'm counting on you, Marcus." Marcus smiled to himself as he read the message. He wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in his life, he felt ready to face it. He had taken that first step, and that was all he needed to do. The rest would come. When he got home, he sat down at his small kitchen table, the silence of his apartment wrapping around him like a blanket. But it wasn't the same kind of silence as before. It wasn't the loneliness that had once weighed on him. No, this was different. This was a quiet pause, a space between what had been and what would come. It was a space where change could grow, where new possibilities could take root. Marcus looked out the window at the city skyline, the lights of the buildings flickering like stars in the distance. This city, which had once seemed so cold and indifferent, now felt a little different. It felt like a place where change could happen, where he could make a difference. And for the first time, he believed it. The next day, he woke up early, ready for whatever the future would bring. He wasn't sure what path he was on, but he knew this. It was his path, and it was one he was ready to walk, one step at a time.